Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to Catechumens Depart. I am Eric Anderson. Maybe I'm an artist on pause, but I am an artist and parishioner of Father Mark's here in, I can't give away where we are. Father Mark, where are we?
I'm Father Mark Kozak from Holy Assumption of the Virgin Mary Church here in South Philadelphia.
See, you say it better than I do. You have more practice.
I do.
Thank you for joining us again. It's nice to be with you. Today, if you're a member of our parish, you'll know that we are approaching our parish's feast day, the Assumption of the Virgin Mary. If you're not, we are approaching it. It is this Saturday. And as a convert, I have a lot of questions about that and like what the end of the liturgical year looks like and what all of this time stuff is. Father Mark did a great series on liturgical time specifically, which you can go back and find in our YouTube channel. It's its own specific playlist. It's a great breakdown of how all of this stuff functions. But as we come up to the end of that, it's kicked up a lot of sort of fresh questions for me. And perhaps these will be useful to our viewers as well, even if they are cradle Orthodox. Like what's the deal with the Theotokos? I mean, coming from sort of more typical American me and my Bible and my personal relationship with Jesus Christ sort of understanding of what Christianity is, this stuff with the Theotokos can be really, it's a little unnerving because, I mean, we have like the small supplicatory canon and the paraclesis and all of this, like there's a lot of it. And they're all directed at Mary. And the language that they use is often so close to the language that we use when we're praying to God that like it still kind of can give me a little bit of the like heebie-jeebies because we're not worshiping her as a god, but it almost can sound that way. So why is she so important to us, and how do we sort of tease apart the levels of worship, or the level of adoration or whatever we're giving to her versus God? And can you talk to us about that?
Sure.
Thank you.
Talk about that. It was also something that I had trouble with as a convert too.
Okay.
Many years ago, and not deep trouble, but some like sort of queasy, sort of like, what does this mean?
Yeah.
Not the liturgical term heebie-jeebie, which is a different liturgical term than that, but very similar. Yeah. Well, let's go back. To the councils of the church first.
Okay.
And we basically have a council about the Virgin Mary in Ephesus in 431.
Okay. Which number was that?
And that was number 3.
Okay.
And there's an argument within the church about the human nature of Christ and the divine nature of Christ, and some had a problem with the Virgin Mary being the Mother of God, being the Theotokos, the one who bore God, as opposed to the Christotokos, the one who bore Jesus Christ, just Jesus Christ. So they were sort of parsing out Jesus, and they went too far. And these are under the priest Nestorian. They were called Nestorians. And
is that what those were? Okay.
Yeah,
I've heard of that particular. Okay.
So that's the first place we should look. That's the first place we go. Okay, she is the Theotokos. She's the one who bore God. I mean, Jesus was God. Jesus was fully God and fully man. He wasn't some sort of separate, a time traveler, a Twilight Zone thing.
Yeah. Some weird dualistic
he wasn't
entity.
a ghost. You know, his human side wasn't a ghost side. That's what they used. Some of the wording they used. he was fully God and fully man. That's what it meant. So it reinforced the first two councils, which is what the councils did, is they reinforced each other. And then it defined the Virgin Mary as the one who bore God. So what does that mean? Well, a lot of hymnology and veneration come out of that time and after that time for the Virgin Mary. So we have countless churches named after the Virgin Mary. We have major feasts who have to do specifically with the Virgin Mary, starting with the beginning of the liturgical year on the 8th of September is the Nativity of the Virgin Mary. The end of the liturgical year on the 15th of August is the falling asleep, dormition, or the Assumption of the Virgin Mary. So you can say that our church year is bracketed by the Virgin Mary's life.
Why her life
which is interesting,
rather than Christ's life?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Well, Christ's life is there too.
Yeah.
And it's not there as an extra thing.
Right?
And actually, those feasts are more important than the ones for the Virgin Mary.
Yeah.
They last longer. They're pre-feast. They have a post-feast, and we're sitting through one right now for Transfiguration, which is an 8-day post-feast.
Which is kind of weird to have a feast during a fasting period.
Yeah, in the middle of a fast. Yes, it's rather strange. But so the Virgin, that's who the Virgin Mary is. Now, if that's who she is...
But let me pause you.
Yes.
You didn't tell us why the church, or if you know, like why the church chose to structure the liturgical year around the Theotokos life.
I really don't know offhand. I think it might have, well, it could have just happened, which really happens in the Orthodox Church.
No.
I think it's the central role that she plays in the life of the church.
Okay.
And I've certainly mentioned this in sermons and in other places. If you're going to be a saint, look at the Theotokos. If you want to understand humility, look at Theotokos. If you want to understand how to deal with grief, look at the Theotokos. You know, and on and on and on and on. So she's venerated as the first among the saints. She's not worshipped. And this is where we have to really, we have to be strict with veneration and worship anyway. Right. But this is where we really have to be strict. And also when you're dealing with people like you and I and a number of our other folks out there, if we came from a Protestant group, the Virgin Mary almost doesn't exist.
Yeah, she's relegated to this super little kind of footnote character.
She's like, doesn't really exist too much at all.
Yeah,
and
she like comes on the back of the donkey and during Christmas time.
I mean, she's
and
there
like
at Christmas time.
in the barn, and then kind of like maybe pops up at the crucifixion, and then kind of
even then doesn't.
But it's just like a little.
Don't seem to mention her too much at all.
Yeah.
And then to go to this is like, whoa!
It's a lot, yeah.
It's a lot, and it takes a lot to work into our lives, into our liturgical, not our liturgical lives, but our lives in veneration and what it really means to venerate. She really teaches us the whole idea of veneration versus worship.
Yeah, let's because you're always good about defining terms. Like let's define those.
Worship is due to God alone. Only the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are to be worshipped and adored. And then everything else is venerated because they point to God.
Iconographically,
especially pointing to Christ. And there's no better pointer than the Virgin Mary to Christ. To the point of, and I didn't mean that use that word by accident, sorry. Oh no. I just forgot what I was going to say.
Like bad pun derailment.
Oh, to the point of, in iconography, the Virgin Mary, what about depicting the Virgin Mary? Mm-hmm. There's only one time that I know of that she's not with Christ.
When is that? I'm trying to,
when she's with her mother.
Oh, right.
Now,
Well,
there might be...
what about with Elizabeth? But no, Christ is in her womb.
Christ is in her womb.
Which there's a really interesting icon of that at the Church of the Annunciation in Nazareth, which shows the baby in the womb. It's really
and Elizabeth was St. John the Baptist in her womb, and the Theotokos with Jesus in her womb, meeting each other. So she is all of these things. Mm-hmm. And we celebrate motherhood. We celebrate the conception of Christ. We celebrate her relationship with Elizabeth and St. John the Baptist. We celebrate her saying, ultimately, my soul shall rejoice in the Lord, is her saying yes.
Right, she was not coerced. It again shows that we have a non-coercive God.
This is a free will decision on her part. Mm-hmm. Father Schmemann used to call this the ultimate yes, and which changed the world. Yeah, and this 13, 14-year-old Jewish young woman did this,
which is remarkable because I mean, I was 13 or 14 once, and I was in no position to.
So, yeah. Now, we learn later, through the liturgical life of the church and through the holy tradition of the church, that her parents, of course, have Davidic and priestly, from Davidic and priestly lines, both of them. She herself was raised partially in the temple, probably for much of her short life. And she was her child is recognized by Saint Simeon and the Anna the prophetess when they bring him to the temple. Mm-hmm. But they had to know her too, right? They were because she had been raised there. She had been there. Yeah.
Which is pretty cool to learn that when you come into. You're like, oh, it's not these things that exist in isolation. The events have continuity, and there's a whole story.
So her family had priests in it. Probably Joachim's family had priests in it. And this is a real flesh and blood human being. Mm-hmm. She was a real person who made a real decision like you and I make. Mm-hmm. Except she's the mother of God. She's the Theotokos, the one who bore God. Yeah. Now, her life with him is of service. Mm-hmm. Service to him. We meet her at the wedding of Cana in Galilee. We meet her, she's always with her son when he's on his various missionary activities. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, ultimately, she's at the cross. With the other myrrh-bearing women. And also she's depicted at Pentecost. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about the iconography of the church. But liturgically, she's prayed for all the time. Yeah. And that doesn't make her a super saint or a minor goddess,
a demigod,
or a demigoddess, or anything like that. Yeah. Now, in the minds of the non-Christian groups that are sort of a part of the Roman Empire or a future part of the Roman Empire during the first 5 to 10 centuries of the church. Did she replace the mother goddess, that particular things in some people's mind at first? Yes, I think she did, because that was a part of their piety. And but then they grew to know who she really was. So she wasn't a mother goddess. She was the mother of God, which is entirely different.
Yeah. Way more complex, right? It's yes. One of those weird things where
it's very subtle.
You think about, like, that's one of the things that I could never really escape from Christianity, is that it's too weird to be thought of. It's like, I can sort of get to imagining like cool gods and like, or very complex gods or whatever. But then you have like the god that became a human that died, and then you have and that wasn't just like something that zapped down from the sky. It was born through a person. Like they're so improbable that it's like nobody would come up with that.
Yeah, I mean, this is the real story.
Lewis talks about this, right?
Lewis talks about this.
Is that the old mythologies, there's hints of the truth in them, right? There's hints of truth in the Mother Goddess. It's like pre-revelation in a way. Like the ancients already like suspected that it was kind of like this, but it hadn't been revealed yet. So they were like sniffing kind of in the right direction, but maybe.
And this couples along with Plato and Socrates and the rest of the Greek philosophers and everything that were a part of the ingredients of our theology. So the Mother Goddess, the good one, not the bad one, the Norse gods cycle, a number of other things were lifted up by Christianity.
Yeah.
But you don't want to make the mistake of the Virgin Mary equals the Mother Goddess.
Right.
Or the Virgin Mary equals, one of the powerful goddess's daughters. Or what.
And when you make that jump, because I was thinking about this sort of in preparation for the show, it's like when you make that jump, when you make that sort of scholastic jump or whatever, what you're then kind of forced to do is what we probably see in Western contemporary Christianity is that you just jettison her altogether. You're like, all of this adoration that's ascribed to this person, to the Theotokos, to Mary, is probably an artifact of early paganism. It's probably a misappropriation of Mother Goddess worship. So let's just kind of like downplay her altogether. Yeah. And then she gets lost, and then you have a vacuum, because you have the vacuum of the proper feminine. So then we get to where everybody's like, well, it's patriarchy. It's like, well, it's not if you go back to the Orthodox Church at all, which has been really, because that's always the thing that gets lobbed at you. Like, all the priests are male, it's patriarchy. Yeah. It's like, but come to liturgy.
And then when we talk about who's the saint that's prayed for the most.
Right.
Who's the saint that's venerated the most?
Right. Which is to say, it functions as a model.
Is the model.
Yeah.
And it's the Virgin Mary. It's not a male.
Yeah. Who do you see when you walk in?
And you look at also, there are a number of women equal to the apostles too, which is interesting too. Because there's not like one or two. There's like a bunch of them. And,
there are.
And you sort of go like, well, what's going on there? Well, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
They're venerated Nino and Olga and
Helen. Yeah.
And so on.
Yeah.
And, they become... They become connected to the Virgin Mary veneration, but they remain separate. It's not like oh, they're all just like carbon copies of the Virgin Mary. They're not.
Right.
They're different people. They come
It's
from
like
different
types repeat throughout history.
Yeah.
I mean, the human phenotype repeats every time a baby is born. Right? It's either a male baby or it's like there's only basically kind of like two shapes that we come in. So it's like that there are similarities or whatever is not surprising. And that's that, I was listening to a podcast earlier, the Bible Answer Man, Hank Hanegraaff,
It's one of your people.
he converted he converted to Orthodoxy a couple years ago.
Became one of us.
And he has a show that I listen to off and on. And he had a guy on there this last show, and the fellow was a Protestant theologian, and he was interesting, but he was talking about the importance of the word, and which is like the Logos is clearly important. And he's hammering on this, and a lot of what he was saying, he was talking about the sort of postmodern redefinitions of language and sort of relativism in language and stuff. It's like that's useful. It's super important, but what he's missing is that like also that stuff gets carried down, like meaning and importance gets carried down through image and through tradition. And because in the Protestant West we cut off everything except for the written word, you lose all of that. And again, things become unbalanced. It's one of the, again, like that was a huge draw for me as a convert, because I was like, there's an imbalance. There's just stuff missing. And then you can look at the iconography of the church, and it carries the story through time too, and it carries elements that aren't in the Bible. But we have women who are equal to the apostles, who are all over in the iconography. It's like that's just as weighty as the written word. And I just thought that was really an interesting, because I haven't heard a voice from that side of the aisle in a little while, and it's like, oh dude, you're missing all the pictures.
Yeah,
like,
well, it's
so you're missing like half the history.
Yeah, the whole package of Christianity comes together in this first millennium. So if we talk about Christian worship, liturgical worship, private prayer, we talk about the veneration of saints, the Virgin Mary, St. John the Baptist. We talk about monasticism starting in the 3rd century, first being almost like a protest against the Roman Empire that turns into something that's so extraordinary.
Yeah.
The music of the church and then iconography itself, which goes from the portraitures of early Latin times and from Egypt into becoming what iconography is, windows to heaven. All of these things come together in the package, and they all sort of not grew together, but sort of were in this package together at the same time. This first 600-700 years of the history of the church. And if you ignore that time, then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Because you have the last part of the package.
Yeah.
And that's the Word of God.
Yeah.
And what I try to explain to Protestants first is, I said, I want you to look on the altar. Tell me what's on the altar. Say, well, you have 7 candles, and I said, they're not on the altar. Actually, they're off the altar.
They're like behind it and beside it, and yeah.
So you have 2 candles. I said, yeah, most of our churches will have 2 candles. They stand for the natures of Christ, divine and human. What else is on the altar? And I go, it's the 4 Gospels.
Yeah.
So please don't trap an Orthodox Christian into a corner and say we don't know about the gospel or about the Bible.
The Bible, yeah.
The liturgy has 761 Bible references to it. Just the liturgy.
And that's not counting Matins and Orthros and all of the
that's not counting
different.
the other service.
Yeah. Because every time we go to Vespers, I'm like, oh, this is just all Bible.
It's all from the Bible.
It's all just Bible.
It's all Bible.
It's like, oh, here's a psalm. There's another one. Like, oh, here's like, well, and going back to liturgical time, that's the nice thing is it's always guiding you through, and it imprints the stories into you in a repetitive way, and it's like, here we are in the church year again. Here we are. Here's this particular piece of the Bible and whatever. It's really instead of it just having to be like, well, my pastor wanted to talk about Habakkuk. This if I'm saying that right.
Yes.
Am I okay? You know, we did a sermon series, which is awesome, right? That's fun and interesting, but it's also not. Well, life is rhythmic. Life is seasonal. God gave us a seasonal world.
Yeah, I mean, we bless certain food at this time. We bless fruit on the Transfiguration.
We're seasonal beings.
Yeah, and this is one of the and then we bless flowers and herbs on the Holy Dormition of the Theotokos.
Why? If I'm not stealing sermon material.
The first blooming of these particular things.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's the basic thing.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like no other. I mean, I'm sure there's some mystical definition. I don't remember.
Oh, it's
Sorry.
okay. Every once in a while, I get to stump.
But it's more important that they understand. We understand that this is a cyclical part of our, as you said, of our time in growing and then the church year ends with the St. John the Baptist.
What's the date of that?
That's the 29th of August.
Of August, okay.
And the original church year comes from the year of the Eastern Roman Empire. So it goes from September to September.
Right, okay.
And then what I think happened is that, and we talked a little bit about this in our church time thing, is that the feasts of the church were plugged in to this. So the feasts of Christ, the feast of the feast of feasts, Pascha, Pentecost, and that whole 3-4
that cycle,
chunk of time. Feast of Nativity of our Lord, and that's another 80 days of time. And then all the feasts of the Virgin Mary are plugged into this time. And that's our liturgical year, really. You put in the other saints because of usually when they fell asleep on the Lord, or when they were glorified, like St. Herman last Sunday. It was the 50th anniversary of his glorification as a saint.
Yeah.
But then they're all plugged in. So there's this whole world there that we all need to go home and look at our calendars and say, what's going to go on tomorrow?
That's why I really do like the OCA.org sort of daily feasts and saints of the day, and
each jurisdiction has some. They have some things to offer those. I like the old books personally better than, but
yeah, I like books better than websites. But
anyway,
that's
so we come to the end of the church year here with the Dormition of the Virgin Mary and the feast day of our church, and which is why I'm in blue. Anticipating her feast coming up, and this is a pretty popular name for churches, the Dormition or Assumption.
Yeah. Okay. I want to see if I can quiz you. Oh, we've got like 4 minutes, Father Mark.
Oh no!
Why blue? I don't want to go down a color rabbit hole too far, but why blue?
It became her color. I don't know why.
Okay.
It became her color.
someday, as I study iconography more, I may know that answer.
You actually may know that answer why there's blue.
Because there's the blue and red. She's always wearing blue and red.
Sort of like a violet red, I heard. Yeah. See, Father Mark is partially colorblind, so Father Mark doesn't deal with color very often.
Sorry,
people ask
that was
him,
maybe kind of mean.
No, but blue is one of the colors I can see.
You can see it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But let's just say, as a little wedding of we can talk about this some other time if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
Our liturgical color life, as it exists today, is not really very old.
Oh.
It's only about 120 years old,
Oh.
and it's been in formation only maybe a little bit before that.
Okay.
It used to be for feasts and for Easter, you wore something lighter. And for fasting times, you wore something darker.
Okay.
So the whole idea of when you wear white and when you wear red and when you wear gold and when you wear all those things, those are relatively
new.
That's a new construct.
Okay.
And
well, that might be a fun rabbit hole to go down.
so
then.
yeah, I mean that's people like to talk to me about colors all the time, and I go like, yeah, well, I still have to ask the subdeacon or the altar server or somebody if I'm wearing the right color. So, but
see, that was not an issue in the old times. It's just like,
nope, just wear
is
darker
this dark?
one or lighter. It's dark,
Okay,
yeah,
good. That's fine. That's right.
That looks good. Yeah. So.
All right. Well, we can wrap up there then. I think that was a lot of interesting territory we covered. Thank you. And hopefully you guys can join us for our live stream for our feast day. And I don't know, are we going to stream Saturday morning? We'll see.
I would think we will.
We'll probably stream. Yeah, so we'll be streaming Saturday morning then if you're watching this before then. If not, then it will be on the archives. And I'm sure that Father Mark will have some sermons that will cover a little bit more in depth about the specifics of the Assumption itself, the feast day, and all of that. Anything else to add before we wrap up, Father?
Nothing else more today. No.
Great. Well, thank you guys. It's always good to be with you. Thank you for joining us. And until next time, catechumens depart.